orphan with nothing to his name saves a dying bird from the streets. Years later, that single act of kindness leads him to a fortune beyond his wildest dreams. But the real treasure wasn't the money. It was the truth hidden in the ashes of a dead man's mansion. A truth that would reveal how one moment of compassion can echo through eternity and change not just one life, but countless lives forever. This is the story of how saving something broken ended up saving everything. Kai was invisible. Not in the way most people are invisible, forgotten in a crowd, overlooked at a party. No. Kai was the kind of invisible that society doesn't even acknowledge exists. He was a ghost in a city full of millions, a boy so thoroughly erased from the world that most people would walk past him without even registering his presence. It was a cold November morning when we find him huddled in the corner of an abandoned factory on the east side of the city. The walls around him were crumbling, covered in layers of graffiti and mold. Broken glass littered the floor like shattered promises. The only light came from cracks in the corrugated metal roof, casting thin lines of gray across his face. Kai was 17 years old, but he looked 40. His clothes, if you could even call them that, were held together by prayer and desperation. A jacket 3 sizes too big, holes in both sleeves. Pants so worn through at the knees that his skin showed through, scarred and bruised. His shoes had no laces, and one sole was completely detached, flapping with every step like a broken wing. His hair was matted, his face gaunt, his eyes had seen too much for someone so young. But here's what you need to understand about Kai. He didn't start out this way. Kai had a mother once. Her name was Elena, and she loved him so fiercely that she would have moved mountains if it meant keeping him safe. But mountains don't care about love. When Kai was 8 years old, Elena got sick. The kind of sick that doesn't go away. The kind that empties your pockets faster than you can fill them. She worked 3 jobs trying to keep them afloat. But it wasn't enough. It was never enough. One winter morning, Elena didn't wake up. The state came and took Kai away. Foster care, they called it. A system designed to protect children. But Kai learned quickly that the system was more like a machine. Cold, indifferent, designed to process bodies, not save souls. He was shuffled from house to house, family to family. Some were neglectful. Some were cruel. One was genuinely evil in ways that still haunted his nightmares. By the time Kai was 15, he'd had enough. He ran. The streets became his home. And the streets, unlike the foster system, were honest about what they offered. Nothing. No pretense. No false promises. Just survival. Moment to moment. Day to day. For 2 years, Kai had survived on scraps. Dumpster diving behind restaurants. Stealing when he had to. Panhandling when he could. Stomach the humiliation of asking for spare change from people who looked at him like he was less than human. He'd slept in shelters where the beds were infested with bedbugs and the air was thick with despair. He'd slept in abandoned buildings where the rats were almost as desperate as he was. He'd slept on park benches in the freezing cold, using newspapers as blankets. But the worst part wasn't the hunger. It wasn't the cold. It wasn't even the violence. And there was violence. Plenty of it. From other street kids and from people who preyed on the vulnerable. The worst part was the loneliness. It's a specific kind of loneliness that comes from being completely, utterly alone in a city of 8 million people. It's the loneliness of knowing that nobody would notice if you disappeared tomorrow. Nobody would care. Nobody would search. Nobody would mourn. You could die on these streets and your body might not be found for weeks. And when it was found, you'd be filed away as just another statistic. another homeless kid, another problem solved. This loneliness had a weight to it. It pressed down on Kai's chest every single day, making it harder to breathe, harder to move, harder to find a reason to keep going. And that's exactly where our story finds him on this particular November morning. Kai was sitting in that corner of the abandoned factory, and he was thinking about ending it all. Not in a dramatic way, not with a note or a plan, just the simple, quiet thought that maybe it would be easier to just stop. Stop fighting. Stop struggling. Stop pretending like tomorrow might be better when every single day was exactly like the last one. Stop existing in a world that had made it abundantly clear that his existence didn't matter. He was staring at his hands, thin, scarred, dirty, and wondering how much easier life would be if they just stopped working. If his heart just stopped beating. If he could finally rest. The hunger was particularly bad that day. He hadn't eaten in 3 days. His stomach had stopped growling 2 days ago, which somehow made it worse. His body was starting to shut down, conserving energy, preparing for the end. He could feel it happening. There was a strange calmness to it, actually. A resignation. This was it. This was how his story would end. In a corner of a forgotten factory, in a forgotten city, forgotten by a world that had too many problems of its own to care about one more broken boy. But then he heard it. A sound so small, so fragile, that at first Kai thought he was imagining it. A whimper, not human, animal. And it was coming from somewhere deeper in the factory, beyond the wall of debris that separated Kai's corner from the rest of the building. Kai didn't move. He was too tired, too hungry, too close to the edge of giving up entirely. The sound came again, louder this time, a cry of pain mixed with desperation, a creature in distress. Kai closed his eyes. He didn't want to hear it. He didn't want to care. He was barely holding on to his own life. How could he possibly help something else? It was cruel. The universe asking this of him now, in this moment, when he was so close to letting go. But the sound kept coming. And something in Kai, something small, something that hadn't been completely destroyed by 2 years on the streets, something that his mother had planted in him before she died, something that said life matters, all life matters. That something refused to let him ignore it. Slowly, painfully, Kai pushed himself up from the ground. His legs were stiff. His muscles screamed in protest. His vision swam for a moment as the blood rushed back into his head. But he moved forward, pushing through the debris, following the sound of that desperate cry. And that's when he saw it. A bird, specifically a sparrow. Small, delicate, with feathers that had once been brown and gold, but were now matted with blood and dirt. One wing was bent at an unnatural angle. The other was pinned under a piece of fallen metal. The bird's eye was open, watching Kai with a mixture of fear and hope, as if it understood that this broken boy was its only chance. For a moment, Kai and the bird simply looked at each other. Two creatures, broken in different ways, meeting in the darkness of an abandoned factory. Two beings who had been discarded by the world. Two souls on the edge of oblivion. And in that moment, something shifted inside Kai. He couldn't save himself. He couldn't fix his own life. He couldn't bring his mother back or undo the trauma of the foster system or erase the 2 years of suffering on the streets. But maybe he could save this. Maybe he could save this one small thing. It was a crazy thought. Kai had nothing, no resources, no shelter, no food even for himself. Helping this bird made no logical sense. It was the choice of a fool. But Kai was beyond logic now. He was in a place where the only thing that mattered was whether he could do something kind, something that mattered, something that proved his existence wasn't completely pointless. Slowly, carefully, Kai reached down and lifted the piece of metal off the bird's wing. The sparrow cried out in pain, but it didn't fly away. It couldn't fly. Its wing was too damaged. Instead, it just lay there, trembling, watching Kai with those dark, desperate eyes. Kai looked around the factory floor. He needed something, a box, a crate, anything that could serve as a shelter for the bird. His eyes landed on an old wooden crate in the corner, relatively clean compared to the rest of the factory. He carefully picked it up and lined it with some newspaper and an old piece of cloth he found. Then, as gently as he possibly could, he picked up the bird and placed it in the makeshift nest. The sparrow didn't resist. It seemed to understand that this boy was trying to help. It settled into the cloth, its broken wing folded against its body, its breathing shallow and rapid. Kai sat down next to the crate and watched the bird. "It's okay," he whispered, though he wasn't sure if he was talking to the bird or to himself. "You're going to be okay. I'm going to take care of you. I promise." It was a promise he had no business making. He couldn't even take care of himself. But in that moment, with that small bird's life in his hands, Kai made a decision that would change everything. He decided to live. Not because his own life suddenly seemed worth living, not because he suddenly had hope for his own future, but because this bird needed him. Because for the first time in 2 years, someone, something, needed him to survive. And that was enough. That was enough to push back against the darkness just a little bit. Just enough to take one more day, one more breath, one more moment. Kai didn't know it yet, but he had just set in motion a chain of events that would eventually lead to a fortune beyond his wildest dreams. He didn't know that this single act of compassion would echo through time and space and circumstance in ways that seemed impossible. All he knew was that he had a bird to take care of now. And that bird, the one he would soon name Star, would become the most important thing in his life. But Star wasn't content to stay hidden in that factory forever. The first night with Star was the hardest night of Kai's life. And that's saying something, considering everything he'd already endured. Kai lay on the cold concrete floor next to the wooden crate, unable to sleep. Every few minutes, he would lean over and check on the bird, making sure it was still breathing. The sparrow's breathing was shallow and irregular. And Kai found himself holding his own breath in sync with Star's, as if by doing so he could will the bird to keep living. Around midnight, Star's breathing became even more labored. Kai panicked. He didn't know anything about birds or injuries or medicine. He had no idea what to do. All he could do was sit there and watch, helpless, as the creature he decided to save seemed to be slipping away from him. Kai started talking to the bird. He told Star about his mother, about Elena, and how she used to sing to him when he was sick. He told Star about the foster homes, about the cold nights and the cruel people. He told Star about the loneliness, about how many times he'd thought about giving up. He told Star everything, pouring out 2 years' worth of pain and fear and despair into the darkness of that abandoned factory. "You can't die," Kai whispered to the bird. "You can't die because I need you. I need you to live because if you die, then there's no point to any of this. If you die, then I'm just a broken boy in a broken factory and nothing matters. But if you live, then maybe something I do matters. Maybe I'm not completely useless. Maybe I'm not completely invisible." Kai's voice cracked as he spoke. Tears streamed down his face, the first tears he'd cried in months. He'd thought he was too broken to cry anymore, but here he was, sobbing over a dying bird in the darkness. But then something miraculous happened. Star's breathing stabilized. The bird's tiny eye opened and seemed to focus on Kai. And in that moment, something passed between them. An understanding, a connection, a bond that transcended the physical. Kai realized that Star wasn't just a bird he was trying to save. Star was a mirror. Star was everything Kai was. Broken, desperate, discarded, but still fighting. Still alive, still hoping. And in saving Star, Kai was saving himself. By dawn, Star was still alive. Weak, but alive. And Kai had made it through another night. The real challenge began the next day. Kai needed food, not just for himself anymore, but for Star as well. He had no idea what sparrows ate, but he figured it had to be seeds or insects or something small. He ventured out into the city, leaving Star alone in the factory for the first time, and his heart nearly broke with worry. He spent the day searching through parks and gardens, collecting seeds and small insects. He found a dead cricket under a park bench and carefully placed it in his pocket. He gathered dandelion seeds and bits of grain from a bird feeder in a public square. He felt like a thief, stealing from the birds that had homes and people who cared for them. But he told himself it was for a good cause. When he returned to the factory that evening, Star was still alive, still waiting, still hoping. Kai placed a few seeds in the crate, close to Star's beak. The bird didn't eat them immediately, but Kai could see the interest in its eyes. It was a start. Over the next few days, a routine emerged. Kai would wake up early, spend an hour or two foraging for food, for himself and for Star. He would bring back whatever he could find. Seeds, insects, bits of bread he managed to scavenge from dumpsters. Star would eat some of it, slowly gaining strength. Kai would eat what was left, which was usually very little, but it was enough to keep him going. During the day, Kai would sit with Star and talk. He would tell the bird stories about his mother, about his dreams before everything fell apart, about what he imagined life could be like if things were different. He would sing to Star, the same songs his mother had sung to him. His voice was rough and untrained, but Star seemed to enjoy it. At night, Kai would sleep next to the crate, his hand resting on the edge, ready to help if Star needed him. He had nightmares, as always. Visions of foster homes and cold streets and the feeling of being completely alone. But now, when he woke up gasping and terrified, there was Star. There was something that needed him. There was a reason to keep breathing. A week passed, then 2 weeks, then a month. Star's wing was healing slowly. The bird could move it now without crying out in pain. The matted feathers began to smooth out. The bird was gaining strength, becoming more active. It would hop around the crate, fluttering its wings, experimentally, as if testing whether they still worked. And Kai was changing too. The desperation that had driven him to contemplate ending his life was slowly being replaced by something else. Purpose. Every morning, he woke up with a reason to get out of bed. Every day, he had something to work toward. Every night, he fell asleep knowing that he had made a difference, that he had kept something alive, that he mattered. His body was still thin, still scarred, still bearing the marks of 2 years on the streets. But there was something different in his eyes now. There was a light there that hadn't been there before. A spark of hope, a glimmer of belief that maybe, just maybe, his life wasn't completely pointless. But as Star grew stronger, a new problem emerged. The bird was becoming too big for the factory. It needed space to fly, to exercise its wings, to be what it was meant to be. And Kai knew that eventually, Star would be healthy enough to leave. The bird would fly away, back into the world, and Kai would be alone again. This thought terrified him. He had grown so dependent on Star, so reliant on the bird's presence to give his life meaning, that the idea of losing the bird felt like losing everything. It felt like going back to that dark place, that place where nothing mattered and life wasn't worth living. One night, about 6 weeks after finding Star, Kai sat with the bird and had a conversation that would change everything. "I know you're getting better," Kai said, his voice soft. "I know your wing is almost healed. I know you're going to be able to fly soon. And I know that when you do, you're going to leave. You're going to fly away and find other birds and live your life and forget about the broken boy who saved you." Star tilted its head, as if listening. "And that's okay," Kai continued. "That's what's supposed to happen. That's what I wanted when I saved you. I wanted to give you a chance at life, a real life, not just survival in this broken factory. I wanted to give you freedom." Kai paused, struggling with his emotions. "But I'm scared," he admitted. "I'm scared that when you leave, I'm going to go back to being invisible. I'm scared that I'm going to lose the only reason I have to keep fighting. I'm scared that without you, I'm going to want to give up again." He looked at the bird, really looked at it, and something shifted in his understanding. "But maybe," Kai said slowly, "maybe that's not true. Maybe I don't need you to survive. Maybe I need to survive for you. Maybe the point isn't that you saved me by needing me. Maybe the point is that I saved myself by choosing to save you." It was a profound realization. Kai had spent the last 6 weeks thinking that Star had given his life meaning. But the truth was more complex than that. By choosing to help Star, by choosing to sacrifice his own comfort and hunger to care for another creature, Kai had chosen to be the kind of person who mattered. He had chosen to be someone worth saving. And that choice, that single decision to help a broken bird when he himself was broken, had changed him fundamentally. "So when you fly away," Kai said to Star, "I'm going to let you go. Because that's what love is. It's not holding on, it's letting go. And I love you, Star. I love you enough to let you be free." That night, Kai slept better than he had in months. The next morning, Star's wing was fully healed. The bird hopped around the crate with energy and confidence. It fluttered its wings, testing them, and for a moment, it lifted off the ground. It flew in a small circle around the factory before landing back in the crate, as if to show Kai that it could do it. Kai smiled through his tears. "Okay, buddy," he said. "I think you're ready." He walked to the broken window of the factory, the one that looked out over the city. Star hopped onto his shoulder, and together they looked out at the world beyond. "Go on," Kai whispered. "Go live your life. Be free. Be everything you're meant to be." And then Star flew. The sparrow lifted off from Kai's shoulder and soared out through the broken window into the morning sky. Kai watched as the bird flew higher and higher, until it was just a tiny speck against the blue. And then it was gone. Kai stood there for a long time, watching the empty sky where Star had disappeared. His heart was breaking, but it was also full. He had done it. He had saved a life. He had made a difference. And in doing so, he had saved his own life. But what Kai didn't know, what he couldn't possibly have known, was that Star wasn't finished with him yet. The bird had learned something in those 6 weeks with Kai, something profound about loyalty and gratitude and the bonds that transcend the physical. Star wasn't going to fly away and forget about the boy who had saved him. Star was going to lead him to something extraordinary. But that would have to wait for another day. First, Kai had to survive what came next. The days that followed Star's departure were a whirlwind of emotions for Kai. He felt an emptiness in the pit of his stomach, a hollowness that echoed the absence of the bird who had become his companion and his reason for living. But alongside that emptiness, there was also a newfound sense of freedom. He had let Star go, and in doing so, he had discovered a strength within himself that he never knew existed. With each passing day, Kai began to carve out a new existence. He still spent his mornings foraging for food, but now he also sought out places where he could find help. He discovered a local shelter that offered meals and resources for homeless youth. At first, he felt hesitant about entering, but the gnawing hunger in his stomach pushed him through the door. The shelter was a modest building, filled with the sounds of laughter and the smells of cooking food. It was a stark contrast to the cold, dark factory that had been his home for so long. Kai was greeted by a friendly volunteer named Mia, who had a warm smile and a gentle demeanor. She offered him a hot meal and sat down to talk with him. "I see you around here a lot," she said, her eyes full of kindness. "How are you doing?" Kai hesitated, unsure of how much to share. But as he took his first bite of warm stew, he felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. "I'm trying to get by," he finally admitted. "I just lost my friend." Mia nodded, understanding in her eyes. "Loss is hard, especially when you've found something worth holding on to. But it sounds like you did something really brave. You cared for that friend when they needed you." Her words struck a chord within Kai. He realized that he had been so focused on his own pain that he hadn't fully appreciated the impact of his actions. He had chosen to save Star, and in doing so, he had learned what it meant to care for another being. That lesson was now a part of him, one that he could carry into the future. As the days turned into weeks, Kai became a regular at the shelter. He made friends with other young people who shared similar stories of hardship and resilience. They bonded over their struggles, finding comfort in each other's company. For the first time in a long time, Kai felt a sense of belonging. He began to see that he was not alone in this world, that there were others who understood his pain and who were also fighting to carve out their own paths. One day, while helping clean up after a meal at the shelter, Mia approached Kai with a proposition. "We're starting a program here to help young people like you gain skills and find jobs. Would you be interested in participating?" Kai's heart raced at the thought. He had never held a real job before, and the idea of having a purpose beyond mere survival was both thrilling and terrifying. I think so," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. Mia smiled, her eyes sparkling with encouragement. "Great. We'll start with some workshops on resume writing and interviewing skills. You have so much potential, Kai. I can see it." With Mia's support and the camaraderie of his new friends, Kai began to transform. He attended every workshop, soaking up knowledge like a sponge. He learned how to write a resume, how to present himself in interviews, and how to communicate effectively. Each new skill he acquired built his confidence, piece by piece. But even as he flourished in this new environment, Kai couldn't shake the feeling of longing for Star. He often found himself gazing out the window, hoping to catch a glimpse of the little sparrow soaring through the sky. He missed the companionship they had shared, the simple joy of caring for another being. One afternoon, as he sat in the park after a workshop, he felt the familiar flutter of wings nearby. He turned to see a small, brown bird perched on a branch, watching him with bright, curious eyes. Kai held his breath, heart racing. Was it possible? Could it be Star, closer, and the bird hopped closer, too, as if drawn by an invisible thread. Kai felt a surge of hope and excitement. "Star?" he whispered, holding out his hand cautiously. The bird didn't hesitate. It flew down and landed on his outstretched palm, chirping softly. Kai's heart swelled with joy. "You found me," he exclaimed, tears brimming in his eyes. Star looked healthy and vibrant, and in that moment, the bond between them felt as strong as ever. Kai laughed, the sound bright and full of life. He gently stroked the bird's feathers, marveling at how they had both been given a second chance. From that day forward, Star became a regular presence in Kai's life again. The bird would visit him at the shelter, sometimes perching on the windowsill, other times landing on his shoulder as he walked through the streets. It was a reminder that love and connection could flourish even in the most difficult circumstances. As Kai continued to grow and change, he began to dream of a future for himself. He wanted to complete his education, to find a job that would allow him to help others like himself, and maybe one day to have a place of his own. He wanted to create a safe haven for those who felt lost and alone, just as he once had. One sunny afternoon, as he sat in the park with Star by his side, Kai finally felt ready to embrace the future. "You know," he said to the bird, "I think we're just getting started. There's so much more to do, so many people to help." Star chirped in response, and Kai smiled, feeling the warmth of hope wash over him. With newfound determination, he returned to the shelter with a plan. He approached Mia and shared his vision of starting a community outreach program for homeless youth, where they could find support, companionship, and resources to rebuild their lives. Mia listened intently, her eyes shining with admiration. "That's a brilliant idea, Kai. I'd love to help you make it happen. Together, we can create something truly special." And just like that, with the support of his friends and the guidance of Mia, Kai began to lay the groundwork for his dream. He reached out to local businesses for partnerships, organized community events, and even started a fundraising campaign to gather necessary resources. As the outreach program began to take shape, Kai felt a sense of purpose he had never experienced before. It was more than just helping others. It was about creating a ripple effect of kindness and compassion, of turning his own pain into something beautiful. Through it all, Star was by his side, a constant reminder of the power of second chances and the importance of connection. Kai would often look at the bird and think back to that fateful day in the factory, the moment that had changed everything. He had saved a life, and in return, he had found his own. As the program launched, Kai stood before a group of young people, sharing his story and inviting them to join him on this journey. He spoke passionately about the importance of community, of lifting each other up, and of never losing hope. And as he looked out at the faces in the crowd, he saw not just brokenness, but potential. He saw resilience. He saw himself. In that moment, he knew that he was no longer the invisible boy in the factory. He was a beacon of hope, a testament to the power of compassion, and a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is always a way forward. And with Star soaring above him, he felt ready to embrace whatever came next. 6 months had passed since Kai launched his community outreach program. The shelter had become a hub of activity, with dozens of young people passing through its doors each week. Kai had found his calling, and his passion for helping others was infectious. Mia had become like a mentor and friend, guiding him through the challenges of running the program, while also encouraging him to pursue his own education. Kai had enrolled in a night school program, determined to earn his high school diploma. During the day, he worked at the shelter, facilitating workshops and counseling sessions with the young people who came seeking refuge. At night, he studied, pushing himself to excel despite the exhaustion that often threatened to overwhelm him. Star remained his constant companion, sometimes perched on the windowsill of the classroom, sometimes waiting for him outside the shelter. The bird had become something of a mascot for the program, and the young people who came through loved seeing the little sparrow that had captured Kai's heart. It was on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon when everything changed. Kai was sitting in the shelter's small office, reviewing attendance records for the week, when Mia knocked on the door. Her face looked serious, almost troubled. "Kai, there's someone here to see you," she said. "A lawyer." Kai's heart stopped. A lawyer? His mind raced through possibilities, none of them good. Had he done something wrong? Was someone from his past coming to cause trouble? He felt the familiar panic rising in his chest, the old instinct to run. "It's okay," Mia said gently, reading the fear in his eyes. "He seems friendly. He's waiting in the conference room." With trembling hands, Kai followed Mia down the hallway. He pushed open the door to the conference room and found a man in his 60s sitting at the table, dressed in an expensive suit. The man looked up and smiled warmly. "Kai?" the man said, standing and extending his hand. "My name is David Chen. I'm an attorney, and I've been trying to locate you for quite some time." Kai shook his hand hesitantly, still confused and wary. What is this about?" David gestured for Kai to sit down. "Please, have a seat. I have some news that I think you'll find quite surprising." Kai sat, his mind still spinning. David opened a folder and pulled out several documents. "About 3 months ago," David began, "I was contacted by the estate of Eleanor Hartwell. Does that name mean anything to you?" Kai shook his head, slowly. The name meant nothing to him. "Eleanor Hartwell was your biological grandmother," David continued. "Your mother, Elena, was her only daughter. Eleanor passed away 3 months ago at the age of 87. She left behind a substantial estate, and in her will, she specified that her entire fortune should go to her great-grandson, Kai." The words seemed to come from very far away. Kai felt like he was dreaming, like this couldn't possibly be real. "I don't understand," Kai said, his voice shaking. "My mother never mentioned. I didn't even know I had a grandmother." David's expression softened. "I did some research into your family history. Eleanor and your mother had a falling out when Elena was young. Eleanor disapproved of Elena's marriage to your father, and they stopped speaking for many years. However, after your mother passed away, Eleanor tried to find you. She spent years searching, but by the time she located you, you were already in the foster care system. She wanted to help you, but she wasn't sure how to approach it. She decided to wait until you were older, hoping to establish a relationship with you." David paused, his eyes filled with compassion. "Unfortunately, Eleanor passed away before she had the chance. But in her will, she made it clear that she wanted her fortune to be used to help you build a better life. She left very specific instructions about how the money should be distributed." Kai felt tears streaming down his face. He had a grandmother. She had been looking for him. She had wanted to help him. "How much?" Kai asked quietly. David pulled out a document and slid it across the table. Kai's eyes widened as he read the number. $3 million. His hands began to shake. "There are conditions," David continued. "Eleanor stipulated that the money should be used for your education, your living expenses, and any charitable work you wish to pursue. She wanted you to use this inheritance to build a meaningful life, not just to accumulate wealth. She also set up a trust fund that will provide you with a monthly stipend for the rest of your life, as long as you continue to pursue education and charitable work. Kai couldn't speak. His mind was reeling. $3 million. A grandmother who had loved him. A future that suddenly seemed full of possibility. "There's more," David said gently. "Eleanor left you a letter. She wrote it before she passed away, hoping that one day you would read it." David handed Kai an envelope, sealed and addressed in elegant handwriting. "To my great-grandson, Kai." With trembling fingers, Kai opened the envelope and pulled out several handwritten pages. He began to read. "My dearest Kai, if you are reading this, then I have passed from this world, and I am deeply sorry that I never had the chance to meet you in person. I have spent the last years of my life thinking about you, wondering about you, and wishing that I could be a part of your life. I want you to know that your mother was a remarkable woman. She was kind, compassionate, and full of love. When she chose to marry your father against my wishes, I was angry and stubborn. I made a terrible mistake by cutting her out of my life. I have regretted that decision every single day since. When I learned that your mother had passed away, my heart broke. But I also learned that you were alive, that a part of her lived on in you. I spent years trying to find you, and when I finally did, I realized that I had missed so much of your life already. I was afraid that it was too late, that you wouldn't want to know me. So I waited, hoping that one day we might meet. Unfortunately, time has run out for me. But I want you to know that I am leaving you everything I have. Not because I expect gratitude, but because I believe in you. I believe that you have the strength to overcome whatever challenges you face. I believe that you have the capacity to do great things in this world. Use this money wisely. Build a life that would make your mother proud. Help others who are struggling, as I know you have the heart to do. And know that wherever I am, I will be proud of you. With all my love, your grandmother." Eleanor Kai read the letter 3 times, each time feeling a wave of emotion wash over him. He had never known his grandmother, but through her words, he felt her love. He felt her belief in him. He felt the connection that had been severed by time and circumstance, but that still existed in some profound way. When he finally looked up from the letter, his face was wet with tears. David was watching him with understanding eyes. "What do I do?" Kai asked, his voice small. "That's entirely up to you," David said. "But I think your grandmother would suggest that you start by taking care of yourself. Get your education, build a stable life, and then use your good fortune to help others." Over the next few weeks, Kai's life transformed in ways he could never have imagined. With David's help, he set up the trust fund and began to receive a monthly stipend. He moved out of the shelter and into a small apartment, his first place of his own. He continued his education, but now with the financial security to focus fully on his studies. But more importantly, he used his inheritance to expand the community outreach program. He rented a larger space, hired more staff, and created comprehensive services for homeless youth. Counseling, job training, educational support, and housing assistance. The program, which Kai named Second Chances, became a beacon of hope for dozens of young people in the city. Kai's personal story, from homeless street kid to beneficiary of an unexpected inheritance, inspired others to believe that their own circumstances could change. One evening, as Kai sat in the office of the new Second Chances facility, he looked at Star perched on the windowsill and smiled. The bird had been with him through all of it. The despair in the factory, the discovery of purpose, and now, this incredible turn of events. "We did it, buddy," he said to the bird. "We really did it." Star chirped in response, and Kai felt a surge of gratitude. Not just for the inheritance, but for everything that had led to this moment. For his mother, who had loved him so fiercely. For his grandmother, who had never stopped looking for him. For Mia, who had believed in him. For Star, who had given him a reason to keep fighting. And most importantly, for himself. For the choice he had made that day in the factory to save a broken bird instead of giving up on himself. As Kai looked out the window at the city sprawling before him, he realized that the greatest inheritance wasn't the money. It was the knowledge that he mattered, that his life had value, that he could make a difference in the world. And with that realization came a new dream, one that was even bigger than anything he had imagined before. But this dream would require him to face his past in ways he never expected. With the success of the Second Chances program, Kai felt a sense of fulfillment that he had never experienced before. He was busy, often working late into the night, but he was thriving in ways that seemed almost surreal. The shelter was now a beacon of hope for dozens of young people each week, and the impact of his work was becoming increasingly visible throughout the community. He had a purpose, a mission, and a community that depended on him. The transformation from homeless street kid to community leader was something that still amazed him when he paused to reflect on it. However, in the midst of all this success, there was a nagging feeling that tugged at him, a shadow from his past that needed to be confronted. It was like an unfinished symphony, a story that couldn't reach its true conclusion until he addressed the chapters he had tried so hard to forget. No matter how much progress he made, no matter how many lives he touched, there was a persistent ache in his chest that whispered of unresolved trauma and untold pain. One afternoon, while organizing files in his office at the Second Chances facility, Kai stumbled upon a box of old paperwork from the foster care system. He had kept it tucked away in the back of a filing cabinet, a reminder of the life he had fought so hard to escape. The box was dusty, and as he pulled it out, a small cloud of particles danced in the afternoon sunlight streaming through the window. His hands hesitated for a moment before opening it. As he sifted through the documents, memories flooded back with an intensity that caught him off guard. He saw faces of the foster families, some kind, some indifferent, some deliberately cruel. He remembered the cold nights spent in shelters, huddled under thin blankets that did nothing to ward off the chill. He remembered the feeling of being utterly alone, of being invisible, of not mattering to anyone in the world. The weight of those memories pressed down on him like a physical force. But one name stood out among the papers, written in official bureaucratic language that somehow made it seem more ominous. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, his last foster parents before he had run away to the streets. The Thompsons had been particularly cruel, and Kai remembered the fear that had gripped him every single day living under their roof. The way Mr. Thompson's voice would boom through the house, filled with anger and contempt. The way Mrs. Thompson would look at him with disappointment, as if he were a stain on her carefully curated life. The memories were painful, almost unbearable. But they were also a part of his journey, a crucial part that he could no longer ignore. He glanced at Star, who was perched on the windowsill, preening her feathers in the afternoon light. The bird seemed to sense his turmoil, tilting her head and looking at him with those bright, intelligent eyes. Kai felt a connection to the bird that transcended words. Star had been broken too, had been discarded and left for dead, but had found healing and purpose. Perhaps it was time for Kai to do the same. "I need to do this," he said quietly, more to himself than to the bird. "I need to face what happened. I can't keep running from it. If I'm going to help others heal from their trauma, I need to heal from mine." That evening, after the last client had left the facility and the staff had gone home, Kai called Mia into his office. She had become like a sister to him over the past months, someone he trusted implicitly. She settled into the chair across from his desk, and he could see the concern in her eyes before he even spoke. "I want to find my old foster parents," he said, his voice steady but filled with an undercurrent of determination. "The Thompsons. I need to confront them about my past. I need to look them in the eye and tell them how their actions affected me." Mia raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by this revelation. She had known him long enough to understand that this wasn't a decision he had made lightly. "Are you sure that's what you want to do? It might not go the way you hope. Sometimes confronting people from our past can be more painful than healing." "I know," Kai replied, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face before his resolve returned. "But I need to understand. I need to reclaim my story. I've worked so hard to build this new life, and I can't let the past hold power over me anymore. It's like there's a chain attached to me, and I can't fully move forward until I break it." Mia nodded slowly, respecting his decision even though worry was etched across her features. "Okay, let's find out what we can. But you don't have to do it alone. I'll be there with you, every step of the way." With Mia's support, Kai began to dig deeper into his past, a journey that proved to be more complicated than he had anticipated. They contacted social services to retrieve any information they could about the Thompsons. The bureaucracy was frustrating. Forms to fill out, requests to submit, waiting periods that seemed endless. But Kai was patient, driven by a need that went deeper than impatience. It took several weeks of persistent effort, but eventually, they managed to track down an address. The Thompsons still lived in the same neighborhood, in the same house where Kai had spent nearly 2 years of his life. Years that had felt like a lifetime. The house was located in a modest residential area, the kind of place where people kept their lawns manicured and their secrets buried deep. It was the kind of house that looked normal from the outside, unremarkable in every way. Yet it held so many dark memories for Kai. On the day of the meeting, Kai felt a mixture of anxiety and determination that was almost paralyzing. He hadn't slept well the night before, his mind replaying scenarios of how the confrontation might go. Would they deny everything? Would they become defensive and angry? Would they show remorse? Or would they dismiss his pain as the complaints of an ungrateful foster child? He dressed carefully that morning, wanting to present himself as the man he had become rather than the scared, broken boy he used to be. He chose dark slacks and a button-up shirt, clothes that conveyed professionalism and confidence. He looked at himself in the mirror and barely recognized the person staring back at him. When had he become so strong? When had the fear in his eyes been replaced with determination? Mia met him at the office early that morning, and together they drove to the Thompsons' home. The drive was quiet, filled with an anticipatory tension. Mia kept one hand on the steering wheel and occasionally reached over to squeeze his hand in a gesture of support. Kai appreciated her presence more than he could express in words. As they approached the house, Kai's heart pounded with an intensity that made him feel lightheaded. The memories rushed back, each one sharper and more vivid than the last. He had lived here for nearly 2 years, from age 14 to 16, and yet, stepping back onto this street felt like crossing a threshold he had long feared. Every familiar landmark, the large oak tree in the front yard, the crack in the driveway, the way the house seemed to loom over the street, triggered a cascade of painful recollections. He remembered the first day he had arrived, confused and scared, with nothing but a small bag of belongings. He remembered Mrs. Thompson's cold greeting, the way she had shown him to a small room in the basement without warmth or welcome. He remembered the rules, so many rules, and the punishments for breaking them. He remembered the hunger, not just physical but emotional, the desperate need for someone to care about him that was never fulfilled. Mia parked the car at the curb, and they sat in silence for a moment. The engine ticked as it cooled, and Kai could hear the sound of birds singing in the trees. A reminder that life continued, that the world didn't stop for anyone's pain. "Are you ready?" Mia asked gently, her voice soft with understanding. Kai took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle on his shoulders. "No," he admitted honestly, "but I need to do this. I need to do this for the boy I was, and for all the kids I'm trying to help now. How can I ask them to face their trauma if I'm not willing to face mine?" They walked up to the front door together, Mia slightly behind him in a gesture of support. Kai's hands trembled slightly as he raised them to knock. The sound echoed through the quiet street, and he could hear movement inside the house. His heart rate accelerated, and he felt a moment of panic. What if he couldn't do this? What if he broke down? But then Mia placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder, and he found his center again. Moments felt like hours as they waited. Finally, the door swung open, revealing Mrs. Thompson, older than he remembered, but still imposing in her bearing. Her face was lined with age, her hair graying, but her eyes, those cold, critical eyes, were exactly as he remembered them. Her eyes widened in recognition, and for a moment, something flickered across her face. Surprise, certainly, but also something else. Was it discomfort, guilt, fear? He couldn't quite tell, and the ambiguity frustrated him. "Kai," she said, her voice a mixture of surprise and something else. Something that sounded almost like regret. "What are you doing here? It's been years." "Can we talk?" Kai asked, his voice steady despite the turmoil churning inside him. He was amazed at how calm he sounded, how in control he appeared, when internally he felt like he was falling apart. Mrs. Thompson hesitated, her hand gripping the edge of the door as if she might close it and pretend this wasn't happening. Then she stepped aside and waved them in with a gesture that seemed reluctant. "Come in, I suppose." The interior of the house felt just as cold and uninviting as he remembered, perhaps even more so now that he could see it with adult eyes. The furniture was worn, the walls a dull beige that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The air smelled of furniture polish and something else, something stale and closed off. Kai stepped inside, his heart racing so fast he thought it might burst from his chest. Every fiber of his being wanted to run, to escape back to the safety of his car and the life he had built. But he forced himself to move forward. They settled into the living room, an awkward arrangement of old furniture that seemed to echo the dysfunction of the household. As they sat, Kai could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. Mr. Thompson appeared shortly, looking equally surprised to see him. He was older too, his hair completely white now, his face more lined. But his expression was the same, that mixture of indifference and mild irritation that Kai remembered so well. "What's this about?" he asked, eyeing Kai with suspicion as if his Former foster son were a stranger trying to sell him something he didn't want. I wanted to talk about my time here, Kai said, trying to keep his voice calm and measured, though his hands clenched into fists in his lap. About what happened. About how you treated me. Mrs. Thompson shifted uncomfortably in her seat, crossing and uncrossing her legs. We did what we could, she said, her voice defensive. It was a difficult time for everyone. You were a troubled kid, and we did our best to help you. Difficult for everyone? Kai echoed, his voice rising slightly despite his best efforts to maintain control. You treated me like I was a burden, like I was something you had to tolerate rather than a child who needed care. You were cruel, and you made me feel worthless. The words poured out of him now, years of pain and anger finding expression. He had rehearsed this confrontation 100 times in his mind, but now that he was actually saying the words, they felt raw and real in a way he hadn't anticipated. Mr. Thompson scoffed, leaning back in his chair with a dismissive gesture. You were a troubled kid. We didn't have the resources to deal with your behavior. You were angry, defiant, and, frankly, ungrateful for everything we provided. I was a kid who needed help. Kai shot back, his anger bubbling to the surface like lava from a volcano. I was a kid who had lost his mother, who had been shuffled through the system, who was terrified and alone. You were supposed to care for me, but instead, you made my life miserable. You didn't even try to understand me. You just wanted me to be quiet and invisible. Mrs. Thompson opened her mouth to respond, but Kai cut her off, his voice growing stronger with each word. You don't get to defend yourselves. You don't get to brush this off as though it was just a difficult situation. You don't get to rewrite history and pretend you were doing your best. I wanted to confront you both because I've spent years trying to overcome the damage you did. I've had nightmares, panic attacks, trust issues. I've struggled to believe that anyone could care about me because you taught me that I was unlovable. I'm here today because I've built a new life, but I need you to understand at the impact of your actions. I need you to acknowledge the pain you caused. Silence hung in the room, thick and heavy. Kai felt the heat of his words, the weight of the truth he was laying bare. He didn't want to feel anger. He had worked hard in therapy to move past it. But it surged through him anyway, a necessary part of reclaiming his narrative and his power. Finally, Mrs. Thompson spoke, her voice trembling with what might have been tears. I didn't realize how much you were suffering. We didn't know how to help you. We were struggling too, you know. Money was tight, and we were dealing with our own issues. That's the point, Kai said, his voice softer now, but no less intense. You didn't try. You treated me like I was less than human, like my feelings didn't matter. I needed love and support, and I didn't get it from you. I got criticism and coldness and indifference. Do you know what that does to a child? Do you understand the lasting impact of that kind of neglect? Mr. Thompson shifted uncomfortably in his chair, then sighed, a deep, weary sigh that suggested he was tired of the conversation before it had even really begun. We were struggling too. It was hard for us. We didn't know what we were doing. Kai shook his head, his patience wearing thin. That's not an excuse. You had a responsibility. You took me into your home, and that came with an obligation to care for me, to nurture me, to help me heal. And because of you, because of your failure to do that, I spent years in the system, feeling unwanted and unloved. I ran away because living on the streets felt safer than living in your house. Do you understand what that means? Do you understand that I chose homelessness over your care? The Thompsons' faces were a mix of regret and defensiveness, a combination that made Kai want to scream. They still didn't fully understand. They still saw themselves as victims in this story. And now? Mr. Thompson asked, his voice low and almost inaudible. What do you want from us now? Do you want money? An apology? What will make this right? I want you to understand, Kai replied, his resolve firm and unwavering. I want you to acknowledge the pain you caused, not as an excuse or a justification, but as a simple acknowledgement of fact. I want you to know that I am not broken, or rather, I was broken, but I've healed myself. I am stronger than you could ever imagine. I've built a life, and I'm going to help others who were lost like I was. I'm going to create the kind of safe, loving environment that you failed to provide. He stood up, feeling the need to physically assert his power in this space where he had once felt so powerless. I came here today, not for you, but for me. I came here to reclaim my power, to face the people who hurt me and tell them that they don't define me anymore. The room fell silent again as the weight of Kai's words settled in, heavy and undeniable. He could see Mrs. Thompson's eyes glistening with tears, though whether they were tears of genuine remorse or self-pity, he couldn't be sure. I'm sorry, she said finally, her voice breaking. I'm truly sorry for how we treated you. I wish I could take it back. I wish I had known better, done better. Kai took a deep breath, feeling the tension in his chest begin to ease slightly. This wasn't about seeking revenge or harboring bitterness. It was about healing for both of them, though he wasn't sure if the Thompsons were capable of the kind of deep work that true healing required. You can't change the past, and I don't expect you to, Kai said quietly, his anger subsiding into something more like sadness. But I need to move forward. I need to let go of this anger. Not for your sake, but for mine. Holding on to this rage is like drinking poison and expecting it to hurt you. Mrs. Thompson nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. We never wanted to hurt you. I was overwhelmed and didn't know how to handle it. I'm so sorry for everything. I forgive you, Kai said, the words surprising himself even as he spoke them. But it's going to take time for me to fully let go. I need to focus on my future, on the work I'm doing to help other kids like I was. Mr. Thompson nodded slowly, his expression softer now than it had been at the beginning of the conversation. We'll always have to live with what we did. But we're sorry, Kai. Truly. And we're proud of what you've become, even if we don't deserve to be. Kai stood, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. Not completely, but enough that he could breathe more easily. Thank you for being honest. I appreciate that. I don't know if we'll see each other again, and that's okay. But I needed to do this. I needed to face what happened and reclaim my story. As he turned to leave, Mia followed him out, placing a supportive hand on his back. The air outside felt lighter, fresher, as if a storm had passed and the world had been washed clean. The afternoon sun was warm on his face, and he could hear the sound of children playing somewhere in the distance. A reminder that life continued, that there was joy and laughter in the world, even after pain. Are you okay? Mia asked, concern etched across her face. She had known him long enough to understand that this confrontation, while necessary, had taken an emotional toll. I think so, Kai replied, feeling a strange sense of peace settling over him. I think I finally faced what I needed to. It's not about forgiving them for their sake. It's for my own. I realized in there that holding on to the anger was only hurting me. They've already caused enough damage. I won't let them continue to hurt me by refusing to let go. Mia smiled, a proud look on her face. You're incredibly strong, you know that? Most people would have either avoided this conversation entirely or let their anger consume them. But you managed to be honest and vulnerable while also maintaining your dignity. Kai chuckled softly, shaking his head. I'm still learning. But I know I can overcome anything now. I have a purpose, and I'm not going to let anything from my past define me. The Thompsons were part of my story, but they don't get to be the author of it anymore. As they drove back to the shelter, Kai felt a renewed sense of determination and peace. The weight that had been pressing down on him for so long seemed to have lifted, replaced by a lightness that felt almost foreign. He looked out the window at the city passing by, at the people on the streets, and he felt a deep sense of connection to all of them. They were all fighting their own battles, carrying their own pain, trying to find their way in a world that could be cruel and indifferent. With each day that passed after the confrontation, Kai continued to pour his energy into the Second Chances program with renewed vigor. He helped others who were struggling just like he once had, drawing on his own experiences to offer genuine empathy and understanding. He wanted to create a space where young people felt valued and loved, a place that offered hope, support, and understanding, a place that was everything the Thompsons' house had not been. He expanded the program's services, adding mental health counseling, educational support, job training, and housing assistance. He hired staff members who had themselves experienced homelessness, believing that lived experience was one of the most valuable credentials someone could have. The program grew, and with it, so did Kai's sense of purpose. And through it all, Star remained by his side, a constant reminder of the journey they had taken together. The bird had become something of a symbol for the program, a living testament to the power of second chances and the importance of compassion. Young people who came through the program loved seeing Star, and many of them found comfort in the bird's presence. It was as if Star understood their pain in a way that words sometimes couldn't express. As the weeks turned into months, Kai found himself not just surviving, but thriving in ways he had never imagined possible. He was no longer the broken boy in the factory. He was a beacon of hope for others, a living testament to the power of resilience and the importance of compassion. He had reclaimed his story, faced his demons, and emerged stronger on the other side. But as he looked toward the future, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was still more work to be done. Not just for himself, but for the community he had grown to love. There were still young people sleeping on the streets, still families struggling to survive, still systems that needed to be changed. And Kai was determined to be part of that change. And little did he know, the universe had more surprises in store for him, surprises that would challenge him in new ways and push him to grow even further.